we can actually seriously just come right back.
Cool, man. Cool.
We're back with Jevon. I'm telling you, like Sean and I were just talking, like that's gonna be. I felt like I was watching a freaking movie. I was like, oh my god, pretty the edge of my seat. Like, what happens next? What happens next?
Well, and I mean, here's the thing. Holy smokes! The next time I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna send a text or an email to my new buddy Jevon and say like, "Hey, dude, I woke up late and I'm cranky. Like, come on, you know what I mean? Like,
I stubbed my big toe and I'm really
story.
pissed off today. Yeah. How did you deal with your shit?
Well, and I mean, so you know, obviously, going through all that and not going to prison is incredible in itself. But I have to think. I mean, you know, like. You know, and I don't want to be judgy or anything, but you were probably a pretty bad dude. I mean, like you probably were somebody that I probably wouldn't have wanted to be around because of that lifestyle.
Yep.
So how do you take it from that to, you know, getting your daughter and you know, turning things around and getting into music?
Yeah. You know, when I got sober and I was walking through the court process, because I just felt in me that if I was going to go the other way, I was going to go all the other way. I was not going to still keep my toes in the fire. And I knew once I got the understanding inside of myself that I wasn't a one drink guy, that if I was going to drink, I was going to eat pills. If I was going to eat pills, I was going to snort coke. If I was going to snort coke, I was going to eat LSD. I like doing them all together. So just removing it all was the best decision for me. And I started to really tap into the understanding of God saving my life, because I realized that it's virtually impossible to be in the middle of Murder Mountain, in the middle of nowhere, and have a rabbi pick you up when you're on your knees praying. To me, I was just like, that's virtually impossible for that to happen to somebody, that a rabbi shows up after you're praying and drives.
It's like a really bad joke. So this rabbi shows up in Murder Mountain. You know what I mean?
Like, how does that happen, right? Like, even now as I'm talking about it, I still am kind of like tickled pink when I'm like, okay, the gun jammed, miracle 1, miracle 2, the rabbi picks me up, miracle 3, I don't do a day in jail and I have no criminal record. I mean, I own a record label and a mortgage branch, for crying out loud. Like, I'm actually like handling people's finances now. And I was counting millions of dollars every month in the illegal realm.
Well, that's super interesting. But here's a question I have. So did you ever see that rabbi again? Like, did you ever run into him again, or?
No. Sometimes I wonder if he was like an angel or something, like posted.
Well, and you know what? And I'm not that guy per se, but I mean, I'm sitting there going like, you know, there's certain things about when somebody passes away. If you see a dime on the floor, it's them looking after you and stuff, and and that's happened to me personally over the last number of months. But I mean, that is like another level, another plane, right?
Yeah, and you hit it. I mean, that's a great question. Like, you really you hit it on the head, man. Like, what are the chances of all that happening? There's definitely something bigger than myself looking after me. You know, my mom always tells me I was born on 7/7/77, and so my mom is always, since I was a little kid, she's like, you have a call in your life. Like, there's something bigger than what you actually are doing right now. She would always tell me that when I was selling drugs, because I'd go down to Fresno and I'd put $500,000 worth of weed in the garage, and you know, she'd find it because I'm, you know, flooding the dang city, and I'd be out in 4 hours, but she would smell it in the garage. She'd be like freaking out on me, like, what are you doing? There's like enough marijuana to put me in prison for years. Like, get that out of here. Like, my mom, like, you know, totally loves the Lord. And so, you know, going through that process of getting to the place of, I'm walking through court and I'm looking at, you know, 8 years, but I'm getting sober. I started writing lyrics. That's what I started doing. And I started to realize that my lyrics were my diary, right? And I had this interesting way of putting words together. And growing up and being, you know, I was raised on listening to Queen and Led Zeppelin. And I always, as a kid, I always would listen very deeply to the words that they were saying. Now I know why, but I would always pick apart a song when I was really little, and I'd listen to every word that was coming out of Freddie's mouth, every word that was coming out of Robert's mouth. And I listened really closely to why they were saying what they were saying. And I think that kind of growing up listening to that, it, you know, back then music was was actually music. It was not only compositionally correct in regards to the way that Led Zeppelin structured songs, also Queen, but it also had like it just had something about it lyrically that was working well with the composition, right? And so when being raised then into the hip hop culture, I realized in the early 90s that hip hop was really a group of, it was a syndicate of poets. And that's the thing that I loved about all the music I was raised on. It was like poetry to me. So my journals, my diaries became my outlet, so to speak. You know, if I had my lights on in my studio right now, I've got like 200 or 300 med composition books filled with lyrics. I probably got 40 albums, you know, worth of material sitting, you know. So I then got sober, didn't go to prison, started fighting for my daughter, and then I became an at-risk youth advocate. So I've been speaking publicly to at-risk youth for the last 15 years. So I'll get brought into a certain city and share my story, just like I did with you guys today. And then, you know, whether it be I've been on ranches before where it's all gang members. I've been at rehabs before. I've spoken to youth groups. I mean, my story is pretty much applicable to all phases of life, right? So,
well, so here's the thing too, Jevon, and I'm if you ever had the opportunity to get to know me, I'm if you're going to tell me to do something, you had better, or tell me not to do something, you had better have done it, and not read about it in a book. I want to look across the table from you and say, yes, I did this. And you know, as you're doing some of that youth outreach and what have you, you know, had you maybe had some intellectuals or learned people go like, you know what, you don't know what you're talking about, man. Because to me, you're the perfect candidate to go in and talk to these kids. It's like, don't be like me. I've done it.
Right.
You know, as opposed to I studied it. Have you ever had to deal with that?
Yeah. So, you know, when as a kid, that's part of the reason why I started speaking was as a kid, people would come in and you could tell they had no applicable experience to what they were talking about. Right. And I always thought they were fake. Yeah. I was like, these people are just being paid by my school to come in. Yeah. They don't even know what abuse is. They don't know what trauma is. Like this dude's a square. You know what I mean? That's why I think in my head, I'm like, man, this is a pigeon. Like, what are you doing here? And so I've never gotten that response. Just because my story's so traumatic. And another thing is I don't exaggerate. I don't make up and add or take away from it. It's everything that I say out of my mouth is exactly what happened. And most of the time, there's so much there that I can't remember all of it when I'm speaking. When talking to you guys right now, there's so many details. You know, I could actually write a book or a movie on this just because of the fact that there's so much content there. So
I'm getting that, man. Like, and you know, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, this is like, you know, like we're sitting here, we're, you know, quote unquote, supposed to be talking about music, but this is something that I think if people actually listen to and dig into, they're going to get so much more out of this interview because it's like, you know, again, and I kind of joked around, if I'm having a bad day, I'll think about Jevon's story, but we started this show and we were constantly talking about, you know, mental health is a real thing, and, you know, and, this is just, I mean, this is a really, it's a pleasant surprise for me, man. It really is. I mean, it's just absolutely astounding.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear that. Josh Toomey from Knotfest, Head and I were on his podcast, and he sent me a text and he was like, man, I wasn't expecting that. Like, you know, and the cool thing about getting to meet, you know, gentlemen like yourself is this is a lot of the podcasts that I've been on have kind of been more rock or metal driven. And what's cool is I feel like our music and the story is like transcending genre, right? And so I don't care who you are and what genre of music you listen to, we've all got our brokenness and we've all got our areas where we've got trauma or this and that. And so it's really fun for me to step outside of those boundaries and you know, get to meet people like you guys and you know, Josh over at Knotfest and stuff like that. But, you know, the music was really, for me, once I got my hands on a piano and I started learning how to produce, and then realized that I could put my lyrics into music that I produced and I could share my story. That's when the journey, you know, really began. And I started writing in 2004. And, you know, fast forward, I met Head in 2012 or 2013 from a friend of a friend. And him and I connected, and we connected just not about music, but our stories were so similar. Like our daughters are a month and a half apart from each other. And, you know, the fame that he had and the power that I had and the money that we were making, we just became, you know, good friends. And so during that time, we just stay connected and, you know, check in with each other and just be like, man, love you, bro. Like, can't wait to see you again. And so I'd go down to, you know, some of the events that Korn's having and this and that. But over the last 2 years, we actually did a track together in 2017 or 18 that we actually haven't released yet. And I was taking my craft and he was taking his craft, and we pollinated those two worlds together. So that's going to be really cool when that gets released, when the timing's right. But it's a sound that the world hasn't heard yet, right? And it's about the story.
Well, that's cool, man. And I'll tell you, and you know, hopefully I don't insult you with what I'm about to say, but when I was growing up, even to this day, I'm a drummer, but a big hero of mine has been Nikki Sixx. His story, and I'm not going to say exactly, but what you're talking about in his story are very, very similar. And the end result is you go through a whole pile of crap to eventually get to a place where you can help other people navigate those crappy waters, right?
Yeah, I love Nikki Sixx. You know, that was kind of the next phase that I shifted into after Led Zeppelin and Queen was Motley Crue. Mm-hmm. And then from Motley Crue to Metallica and Pantera, and you know, so I'm a huge I don't want to say metalhead, but I've listened to every Metallica album probably 1,000 times. I've listened to every Motley Crue album probably more than 1,000 times. Like, I'm a huge Motley Crue fan in general. I just absolutely, Tommy Lee's drumming is just, I mean, when I saw, you remember that video, which video was it when he comes out on they did
Wild Side?
Yeah, bro. When he came out like drumming, I was just like, you know, and I'm probably 8 or 9 years old. I was just like, oh my God, dude, this guy is a savage. Like, this is just so crazy. And so, you know, Black Sabbath played a big part in the transition from, you know, that over into Motley Crue as well. But, you know, I followed Nikki Sixx's story, like, in and out. And, you know, if we look back at what our commonalities are, it wasn't addiction, it was trauma from our parents.
Yeah.
And probably
right?
was, you know, the absolute rock bottom brokenness that you had to get to before you get out of it, you know. And I hear that story a lot. I've seen it with, you know, some of my own friends, and I've experienced it. So to get to that point where you're absolutely broken to fix, you know, to make a positive change and go forward. So it doesn't have to be genre specific. And it's funny you talk about Head from Korn, because during that 90s metal, I want to call it metal, but they call it new metal, I guess. You can see traces of, you know, I don't know, I wouldn't call it R&B, but hip hop or rap, or just like, you know, like how they were incorporating different. Like, well, how can he sound like he's rapping over metal? That just makes. But it's, well, we were used to growing up, wasn't the same anymore. Everything melded together. You're talking about cross-pollinating genres. That's the coolest music it is, because it's authentic with people who have like minds, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what's fun too, is because I really believe that music doesn't have boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I think that those that try to put music in a boundary, I think they're missing what music actually does. It communicates to all people. Sound transcends language, right? And so, I mean, anybody can put on an old Mozart piece, and you can be like, you don't even have to like Mozart, but you can hear the composition and you're like, man, that guy, like, how did he do that? Like, you know, I've listened to a lot of his pieces and I'm just like, this is insane. And when you look at, you think about Jimmy Page, like there was a lot of influences. They were even their frequency was tuned to 432. Well, that's Mozart's frequency they're tuned into. And so there's these commonalities of, as the generations move, there's one generation influences another one in some way, shape, or form. And that's why we're all connected through that sound and through music. And so, 100% of the reason why I'm even sitting with you guys today is because Head called me. You guys ever heard of the band Red?
No.
So the drummer from Red, he's now a sound engineer.
Okay.
Joe did you guys hear Love and Death's new album that dropped a couple months ago?
Yep.
Okay, so Joe mixed that, and he was the drummer for Red.
Okay.
Well, I went through like 5 or 6 engineers, and they were all connections that Head had connected me with, but my ear was like, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. And finally I was like at the end of myself, and I go, Brian, if I don't get the right engineer, I can't put this out. Like it's not resonating in my spirit, my soul, right? And he's like, well, what about my guy Joe? And I was like, well, who's Joe? He's like, well, he just did my whole Love and Death project. I was like, Brian, like, why didn't you give me this guy like 5 engineers ago? He's like, well, Jevon, I didn't really think about it because you do, hip hop, but Joe's like amazing. And so I got on the phone with Joe. He's like, send me a track. Sent him the track. I let him hear the track that Head and I did first. And he was like, whoa, like this is heavy. And he sent us back a track. And I was like, that's it. That's the sound I've been waiting for. So Joe mixed our whole record. I sent the record over to Brian. Brian calls me at like 1 a.m. one night, and he's like, bro, this is a sound I've been waiting to hear come out of you. He's like, just pick up the phone. I got meetings for you set up. And I was like, all right. So we went through a couple people, and I was on the phone with Zach Yoshioka, who manages Butcher Babies and some other groups. And I connected really well with Zach, and he was like, I want to take you guys on. And so then Zach goes, I got to get you connected with Jamie. And I was like, well, who's Jamie? He's like, she's the GOAT. She's the GOAT of publicists.
She
so
certainly is, man. She certainly is.
She is.
Yeah. And so Jamie, I just love her to death because we connect on a personal level. Yeah. Like I'm checking on Jamie, if I know that her mom's not feeling good, or like Jamie's my friend. And so that's saying something with we just connect at such a deep level. Like she really is. I love her to death. And
well,
so
if you don't mind me saying, Jevon, and we get to know Jamie through, there was another project that she was pushing and she happened upon us. I've been around an awful lot of people in this business, and for somebody at her level, and I hope she's listening, but super down to earth. I mean, she's a pro through and through.
Yeah.
But super down to earth, man, and she knows what she's doing. And it's no surprise why she's bringing folks like you on. Makes no surprise to me at all.
Let's do this. Let's do our second break. How about just our second break, and we'll wrap this whole thing up because sure. Hey, I want to hear you. I want to read your book now. Your freaking book is. We'll do our last break. We'll come back and wrap it all up, and I think we'll all be better people because of it. Because I'm telling you, Sean are going like, holy mackerel, this is awesome. This is awesome. A really great opportunity. Yeah, let's do this. We'll do a break. We'll be back.
Barstools Bandtalk, the complete music bucket list.